everyone hear that? That's okay? Great. So today we're here to discuss management of IT risk within a legal firm with Shanil and Pete. And we're here to give you, I suppose, a valuable insight in real life management within a legal practice of managing risk. And I suppose a good place to start, we'll introduce the team. So I'm from CT4. We make an award-winning M365 backup software, which is integrated into the Fuse product, which is called Fuse 365. And I run the channel for Asia Pacific. I'll hand you over to Pete.
Yeah, so I'm Pete. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Awesome. So Pete from Fuse Technology. We are an Australian IT managed services provider and consultancy. And what we do is really just focus on legal firms and also professional services businesses. And our aim is entirely to just align IT to their business needs.
Over to you, Shanil.
Hi guys, my name's Shanil. I've been managing law firms now for 27 years. Feels a lot longer than that, probably shows. I've managed law firms starting from sort of conveyancing practices in Sydney in the 90s to looking after a 260-year-old law firm in London, you know, in the early 2000s for 10 years. I'm one of the owners of a small practice in Martin Place, Sydney called Australian Presence Legal. And for the purposes of full disclosure, we do use the Fuse 365 service to look after our cybersecurity.
Right, great, thanks Shanil. I suppose the first question, just to kick it off, directed at you Shanil. We know the state of cybersecurity landscape, particularly over the last couple of years, and we hear stories of all these businesses losing data, getting hacked, the disruption of data that goes along with that. I suppose with this in mind, as an owner of a legal practice, what keeps you up at night, Shanil?
I don't think owners of legal practices sleep. Before we even get to cybersecurity, look, it's obviously very important from a compliance point of view. Back when I started managing a small conveyancing firm in the 90s, you managed, data security by making sure your filing cabinet had a lock to it, that the front door to the office had a lock to it. You had identified those people, and we went on to, getting a server in the office and making sure you took your tapes home and all those sorts of things. I guess the tricky part is that as technology moves on, lawyers, like any other sort of professional services industry that's not IT savvy, have assumed that there's a level of protection. So I use O365, I must be safe. And I have a password, I change my password, I must be safe. So those sorts of things are very simplistic ways to think that your documents are safe and your client's information is safe to the standards that are required for a legal professional looking after a client. Now, alongside that, we've had, I don't know about your practices, but from the outset of our practice, we've had the attitude that, a happy staff member is a loyal staff member and a more productive staff member. We've worked on flexible work locations and flexible work times since the outset of our practice. In one sense, that made COVID not quite as sort of tech challenging for us as it has been for other practices. But alongside the happy story of staff being able to manage their hours and being trusted to work from home and things like that goes, how do we make sure the data is safe? They've got a phone, they've got a laptop. How do we ensure that things remain secure to the standard that they would be within an office environment? So these are all things that we've had to, consider.
Thanks, Shanil. Now, Pete, with your experience in the legal industry over 10 odd years, what do you see as, I suppose, the trends, and does that align with what Shanil's telling us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we've seen is that obviously the four walls of the office are not, confining your business. People's desire for flexibility has really pushed that to your homes, outside the office. Your thinking goes away from office-based security, almost more of a device-based security. But with that comes this sort of a lack of understanding when when there's a minimal resources around IT or security, it becomes a lack of understanding around where your data actually lives and how people are actually accessing it. So I want to sort of take a scenario of a lawyer who might not have the tools that they need to do their job effectively, or maybe don't actually have the training or the knowledge to use those tools properly. And what that breeds is the desire for that individual to take things into their own hands just to get the outcomes that they need for their customer and for the business. So you start breeding that shadow IT, people going and using their own personal OneDrives, people using personal Dropboxes, saving things to USB sticks, even saving to their personal one or their personal devices. And this breeds risk, and particularly when you bring in factors like, you know, your personal home internet, customers' environments that you're sharing with that may not be secure, public Wi-Fi's that at the airport. You know, all of that breeds risk. You don't know kind of how that data is moving around, and the business loses complete sight of it. So what's key in all of this is that you actually start building a cybersecurity culture, and that you have the technology, the business processes, but also the individual practices that are going to come together to make sure that you're in a good starting point.
So I suppose a further question to that, Pete, is that we talk about de-risking the business. I suppose at the end of the day, can flexible work possibly gain a competitive advantage for a law firm if they do it right?
Yeah, so I think flexibility and flexible work, it doesn't just mean, you know, your laptop, an internet connection, and remote access to your systems. What we've seen is people want to be able to work from anywhere. They want to work whenever they want to work. They want to be able to access their data from any device, but also have the opportunity to bring their leading edge technology into the workplace. So the critical piece in all of this is how you do that securely. And I think a lot of businesses react to what their people need, and potentially even what their customers need, and they make process changes, and they make systems changes. But we also need to spare a thought for your security practices and the technology that's actually going to support those process changes. And if you can do that proactively in a business, I think that's where what you're saying, the competitive advantage actually comes in. So there's a few things that I've been thinking about is how this, you know, what this means for a law firm. And I think the first thing is all about resiliency and flexibility. You need to modernize as a business to cater to the needs of today, but you also need to be agile for the needs of tomorrow. And I think, you know, when you can take those steps now proactively, you can be ahead of the market. I think the second point is all around building trust within your customer base and also within the industry. You know, as a law firm, you are the custodians of your customers' data. They're putting a lot of trust in you to manage and own that sensitive information. And if you treat it with respect, that builds trust within your customer base, but also within the marketplace. But then I think also there's, on the people side, you know, everyone is focused on delivering great outcomes for their customers. But to do that, you need to enable your people to work in, you know, on their own terms. And what you're actually doing is facilitating that with technology so that they can deliver on the outcomes that you want. But the last one I think is a little bit left of field. So we're noticing, and I'm sure everyone involved in recruitment is that finding new talent and finding good talent is very challenging. And people aren't so much interested in the dollars and cents anymore to get them over the line in a new job. You actually need to give them an environment that they can thrive. And again, technology is what's going to help you facilitate hiring, attracting and retaining your top talent. And it's those people, because we're all in people businesses, it's those people that are going to maintain your reputation and keep that competitive advantage within the market. So just to kind of round that one out, just a thought around who's coming into the marketplace as the new workforce, and they're all digital natives. These are, you know, kids born in the late 90s, early 2000s. They pretty much were thrown a laptop or an iPhone or something as they were growing up. The way that they consume information is different, and so you need to start catering to how they consume information. But at the same time, you need to be quite measured and actually train them in the practices that are going to keep you secure, that's going to ensure that your business is operating in the right way. So once again, it kind of comes down to technology, practices of the organization, and practices of the individuals.
So I guess what you're saying there, Pete, is flexibility with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I suppose I'd be interested in what Shanil has to say about that. Can you resonate with those thoughts too, Shanil?
Look, Pete's covered quite a few areas in that little section, and look, if I was to touch first and foremost on the way people share information and what the relative issues with those are. I've been sort of around in the not law firms requiring flexibility in terms of travelling lawyers and things like that. I've managed a practice where approximately 80 staff were constantly on FIFO travel overseas and interstate. We went through a period where, prior to some proper controls being put in place, it seemed appropriate to be using portable drives, because where they were going, it wasn't great network coverage or issues like that. Those sorts of issues, we were lucky at the time, because those sorts of issues, we, as part of upgrading IT systems and policies, were overcome by putting appropriate security measures. Having said that, something else Pete said about, he almost said kids these days, saying they were born with an iPhone in their hand or equivalent. Yes, they are 100% tech savvy, and as owners of law practices, we absolutely need to, on one hand, take advantage of that to increase our own agility, but on another hand, help them understand the importance of data security. So, by all means, flexible work, as long as the client's requirements are met, fantastic. Set up the systems, though, about what is best practice when using your device, how to ensure that you don't, get hacked. Those are things that are really important, because ultimately, again, getting back to being a person who has a stake in the business, if you have a data breach, a client data breach, you can't expect law cover to save you. You can't always expect your business insurance to save you unless you have a proper cyber risk policy. And if you happen to have a cyber risk policy, you can't necessarily expect that to cover you if you don't have the appropriate measures, required under that policy. It's quite important to be able to understand how to safeguard information. So yeah, that resonates quite closely.
So also too, I suppose, touching on that as well, the director's liability is a big part of this as well, isn't it, Janine?
Look, we've had the, experience of helping other law practices which have suffered data breaches. They can happen in a variety of ways. Some of them are obviously where you lose, improper data security has led to people losing control of both their email passwords and their phones, meaning, issues like two-factor authentication being sufficient becomes irrelevant. Quite a lot of money being lost during that event. We've also had one of the classic tales, which I'm sure that you guys have heard of, where, some of these people who attempt to hack law firms actually have outstanding paralegals working for them. They understand the process of a legal matter. They will understand conveyances. They will understand personal injury lawyers. They're key targets, because genuinely, for someone who's trying to steal your money, a lump sum of money coming somewhere is your key meal ticket. One particular case where we helped a small law firm, coming up to the end of a personal injury matter where a settlement had been agreed, someone who had hacked into their system was monitoring emails and understanding the process of that personal injury matter. At one point, emails coming from the client, the other side, the insurer, and even some third-party suppliers like medical professionals were all being captured and moved into a separate folder in the lawyer's email, which the lawyer didn't notice. Meanwhile, their paralegal, if you like, was actually responding to those emails really professionally, if you ask me. Looked fantastic. And ultimate result of that was the client seemingly sending an email to the lawyer's actual inbox with the wrong bank details. So, look, a lawyer of a small firm suddenly finds herself short, several $100,000. And we luckily managed to get, we sort of did some liaising with law cover, and we managed to get law cover to cover that. But that doesn't happen all the time, because it's not a professional indemnity matter necessarily. Law cover doesn't always approve those. And certainly the cyber risk, automatic cyber risk in that company's business insurance would definitely not cover that matter, because sufficient measures weren't put in place to stop exactly that sort of thing happening. So it's very important, because the buck stops with the director. It could involve a cash loss, which luckily in this case was avoided. It could also potentially, if they found that you fell below the standards expected of a principal of a law firm to protect the client's interests, could potentially affect your practicing certificate as well.
Okay, so they're getting smarter, Shanil. So I suppose a good place to start here, I suppose, with Pete, is when it comes to integrating cybersecurity into a strategic planning, where do we start with that, Pete?
Yeah, so I think it varies depending on the scale of the organisation. I'm sure many firms here that have the resources know exactly where to start. But for those who are resource limited, it's not about reinventing the wheel. You actually just need to find the strategies that are simple but will deliver a great outcome for your business. So many people might be familiar with the Essential 8. We find that's a great starting point that can deliver a lot of outcomes, and it's all aimed at preventing those social engineering attacks. How do you prevent the attacks? How do you minimize the impact of an attack? And how do you actually maintain that data availability? So we find that can actually help not only protect your business, but facilitate that flexible work environment that you need.
Okay, so just winding up here, I suppose, just probably a good place to start too as well. Pete, if you can summarise, I suppose, for our audience, the key takeaways, just to enable them to keep their practices safe.
Yeah, so for us, really simple. Keep it simple, act in some way, and just look at your tech stack. Invest in what you're using, find the gaps from a compliance and a security perspective, and find the complementary technologies to harden your business.
Look, I'm going to take this down to budget. So ultimately, as the owner of a law practice, what is the cost of keeping your filing cabinet locked and your front door locked now, or the equivalent? What we worked out when we went through the costing process was, the fee ranges are quite diverse. One of our clients is a listed cybersecurity company, so we approached them first, and it was eye-watering, the cost of protection. And there was many firms don't offer necessarily a cybersecurity solution on a by user, or what's the posh way of saying it, by seat basis. So it's very hard as the owner of, or owners of law practices to necessarily justify massive cybersecurity bills. So these are all things that I think you guys need to make a call on based on the number of people you have, and sort of there's horses for courses. Don't feel like your only options are tens of thousands of dollars a year if you are a very small practice. There are options that will provide you with more than sufficient cover for your liability purposes, look after your clients, but also look after your bottom line, and allow you to be able to scale your practice. And if you're a larger practice, well, look, you have more options available to you.
I suppose also, Shanil, that the change comes from the top. Yes, change has to come from the directors at the top. Directors' liability, I suppose, at the end of the day, equals responsibility to make those changes. And that's all from us. We're at the, we've got a stand outside if you want to come and have a chat to us. Otherwise, enjoy your lunch.